Welcome back. Last week, we reported on the political massacre that took place in the Philippines just over 2 months ago, the one that claimed the lives of 31 journalists. They were caught up in a shootout when paramilitaries loyal to one clan in the province of Maguindanao gunned down a crowd of their political opponents. This week, in part 2 of our report on what happened in Maguindanao, Simon Ostrovsky looks at the personal fallout of the massacre on one particular family, as well as the culture of impunity that is created when so many killers of journalists in the Philippines keep getting away with murder.
As I reported last week, the Philippines shocked the world media community with news that 31 journalists had been killed in a politically motivated massacre last November. And though some of the suspected perpetrators are now facing trial, human rights advocates are asking if the government is doing enough to question its own role in allowing this atrocity to happen. Whatever the fallout of the massacre has meant for the government, the nightmare for the victims' families has been real. One of the most tragic stories to come out of the Maguindanao massacre was the death of Gina de la Cruz. She was a single mother, and her 5 children were orphaned in the incident. She's buried here alongside 11 of her colleagues, and the hunt for their killers is on. But in the Philippines, you can never be sure that a journalist's murderer won't get away. At 16, Jazeera English is de la Cruz's oldest child. She's yet to finish high school and has a 1-year-old son.
You've already got a child of your own?
Yes, but I have no husband.
It's now up to her to care for her 4 brothers and sisters, too. I met her in the General Santos city slum where she lives with her grandmother and siblings. The family's only source of income is this small kiosk. She told me about the day she traveled to the massacre site to identify her mother's body.
Pagkatapos, habang pupunta kami doon, tahimik kami lahat. At saka picture out mo yung mga mukha nila, yung naghingi sila ng tulong, tulong. Maawa kayo, may pamilya pa kami, may mga anak pa kami. So wag nyo kaming saktan, wag nyo kaming patayin, maawa kayo. Parang ganun yung nasa isip ko, parang naririnig ko kasi pagkatapos nang dumating na talaga ako doon, hindi ko napigilan na umiyak kasi walang awa talaga sila, pinatay nila yung mama ko. Napakasakit.
Now the onus is on the government to deliver justice to people like Jazeera, but there are doubts the authorities are going far enough. Sean Crispin is a member of the Committee to Protect Journalists in New York. He told a press conference in Manila that he feared the government would treat the Maguindanao massacre like it's treated other media killings in the past.
Oftentimes, a journalist in the Philippines is shot and killed. The authorities manipulate the evidence so as to protect influential people who are potentially involved in the crime. Our concern, of course, is that this trend will hold with the Maguindanao massacre. There's already indications that evidence has been manipulated. At least one potential witness has already come under threat and intimidation. And as always, the government hasn't taken immediate and decisive action.
State prosecutors charge that members of Maguindanao's ruling Ampatuan clan orchestrated the attack in order to send a message to a rival politician who wanted to run for governor.
At this point, we do not know to what extent the government, the military, the police was involved in this massacre. We know that there were checkpoints around the area, that some of these checkpoints were manned by the police. We know that there was an army battalion in the vicinity, and yet it doesn't seem like the investigation, at least so far, is taking us into this direction.
The media massacre appears to be a textbook case of blowback. The government armed the Ampatuan militias to counter Islamist rebels in the mountains, but the Ampatuans had their own plans. Weapons confiscated from massacre suspects are military issue. This forensics laboratory in General Santos City is reconstituting altered serial numbers on the guns to establish where exactly they came from.
When you discover arms and ammunition that are only available to the army or that are clearly marked as belonging to the army in the hands of your prime suspects, that should raise serious questions.
The result has been a political nightmare for President Gloria Arroyo.
Even in cafes now and in taxi cabs and in jeepneys, you can hear people talking about this and being outraged when journalists are killed. I think right now the public has reached a point wherein they don't believe anymore what the president is saying.
We do not want this investigation to stop at just determining who pulled the trigger. It really has to go far beyond this. It really has to look into some of the systematic problems that allowed this to happen, and that would involve looking into potential involvement of the military and police, because unless these questions are addressed and answered, this investigation will never be completed.
Jerjin Malabanan is probably not yet old enough to understand why a clan allied with her country's president killed her mother, an innocent journalist. In fact, it's a question the whole country is having trouble coming to terms with. And though the prime suspect now faces trial, it's too early to declare the Philippines a safe place for journalists to work.
More Global Village Voices now on the media in the Philippines.
The thing with the massacre is it's obviously happened, and it's the biggest attack on journalists anywhere around the world. But for us Filipinos in the UK and around the world, it is very surprising that the world's media had been very quiet about it. Why?
Because the journalists there were A, Filipino, and B, not from a large press organisations. They were local journalists in the main. That might be why there was lack of coverage. Had they been from the BBC, Reuters or CNN, then that would have been the big news.
The press in the Philippines is actually enshrined in the Philippine Constitution. But as you would have seen in the recent events, it's something in writing, but not necessarily in practice.
Finally, there's a certain rhythm to television news that viewers have come to recognize, even expect. For instance, when I say finally, you know we're approaching the end of our broadcast. Well, individual news reports also have a rhythm and a few cliches of their own. The people who make a show called Newswipe for the BBC in Britain decided to deconstruct a stereotypical news report to show you a few tricks of the television trade. With something like 750,000 hits on YouTube, it's clearly found an audience, and it's a tailor-made web video of the week. We'll see you next time at The Listening Post.
It starts here with a lackluster establishing shot of a significant location.
Next, a walkie-talkie preamble from the auteur, pacing steadily towards the lens, punctuating every other sentence with a hand gesture before coming to a halt and posing a question. What comes next?
Often something like this, a filler shot designed to give your eyes something to look at while my voice babbles on about facts. Sometimes it'll slow down to a halt, turn monochrome, and some of those facts will appear one by one on the screen. This is followed by the obligatory shots of overweight people with their faces subtly framed out, after which the report is padded out with a selection of lazy and pointless vox pops.
Usually get some inane chatter from people.
Another bit of dull visual abstraction to plug another gap now before the report segues gracefully into a bit of human interest courtesy of some dowdy man opening letters in a kitchen and explaining how he's been affected by the issue. He, unfortunately, was boring, so to wake you up, this is an animated chart. As we near the end of the report, illustrative shots of pedestrians and signs and a pipe at a window.
And then the final summary, ending on a whimsical shot of something nearby, accompanied by a wry sign-off.
If you're lucky, a bit of wordplay fit for a king, or in other words, a regent's treat.